Hey folks, okay, I'm going to read from the fabulous Desiree Cooper's book today, Now the Mother. I'm going to be reading her flash piece called Soft Landing. I hope you've been following along in this series of every Thursday analyzing and sharing some of my favorite flash fiction writings or flash nonfiction. Um, and this one is really unique for a couple of reasons. If you can get this book, I highly recommend it, and you can see the story spread out on the page. It's in two parts. So the story is called Soft Landing, and then you have part one and part two, and it still is flash length, very, very brief, typically up to 750 words. I don't know the exact count of this one, but even just eyeballing it, I can tell it's less than that. So it's a segmented story, and a lot of times I get questions about, well, can you do that? Like, you don't see that many examples of it being done, so I suppose it's natural to wonder, but yes, of course, you absolutely can. And if that is how an idea, a story comes to you, or how a memory comes to you in memoir or in flash nonfiction, go with it. Whatever it takes to get that draft out on the page. If the piece ends up losing the segments and all blending together and becoming a full-length chapter in a memoir or an essay or a full-length short story, so be it. The form got you where you needed to go, and you found your ultimate best shape for the piece. If it stays in the segments, that works too. That is the great thing about playing around with form and giving yourself permission to do so. So this piece is segmented in two segments or two parts. A sort of cousin question to that often comes up is, can you write flash nonfiction or flash fiction in series? And yes, of course you can. It's really, really fun. If you are curious or about that, email me and I'll tell you about what I do with flash triptychs, like flashes in series of 3, and different ways that you can link them, like through an image, through a last line, through, well, now I'm giving it all away, but if you geek out on that idea, write to me and I'll give you more information. For now, I'm going to read this. You know the shape of it. Now you get to hear the lovely story content of it. And I'll talk a little bit about what I see happening. Soft Landing. 1. One night, as I lay awake in the sweltering darkness, the stars called me back to the beginning. I went outside and gazed skyward, where Orion hung low in the Milky Way, and the Milky Way dangled within reach. A current of evolution stirred. Suddenly, I was certain of my fetal wings. Pressing my bare soles against the damp ground, I angled my crooked spine and pushed up on swollen knees. I was aloft. I should have been ashamed, a tiny woman of a certain age, allowing the world to see her nethers as she soared toward the antique moon. But no, the thrill of the evening breeze lifting my thin gown, only made me laugh. My center of gravity shifted, the years molted away like useless feathers. Circling over all that I knew, I saw the sorrows and joys blinking below me like runway lights. My slack biceps became an aileron, my calcified trunk a fuselage. The air rushed over the hump of my back, creating lift. The vertigo of natural forces, the glide of ancient impulses, it was as easy as dreaming. Night after night I took to the air. Sometimes I could sense a ripple in the currents, the way a familiar room feels after a stranger has lingered. Then I knew I was a part of an invisible flock. There were others who had remembered the time before time, when we all had wings. 2. The gate for my plane was at the end of Concourse B. I made my way slowly on thick Birkenstocks, bewildered by all the rushing to nowhere. The horde of travelers parted around me, a stream flowing around a heavy stone. I arrived at my gate with 45 minutes to spare, resting in the boarding area. I picked them out easily. The splotched man with the goggle-like sunglasses who wouldn't stop tilting his face toward the sun. The woman wearing a billowy blue muumuu, fat flaps beneath her arms. The somber gentleman in a wheelchair with reedy legs and owl eyes. The squat woman with the broad shoulders, whose grandchildren ambled behind her in a V. When the plane arrived, these were the people who boarded first. All of us hollow-boned creatures who required extra time. My seatmate was a twitchy man with a sharp nose and eagle-black eyes. As the engines ignited, he gave me a dentured smile. An hour into the flight, I was jostled awake by the turbulence. I glanced at the man beside me, resisting the urge to grab his hand. It could tell that he was, and I could tell, I glanced at the man beside me, resisting the urge to grab his hand. It was then that I noticed his feet planted on the floor, legs rigid, and I could tell that he was doing the same thing I was doing, pressing his soles against the metal floor, ready to leap. When the engine spit fire over the Rockies, my heart stuttered against my ribcage. Outside of the window, the sun spilled vermilion. Behind us, a plume of dark smoke. "Fasten your seatbelts and place your heads on your knees." Women screamed, men sobbed into their hands. As the plane dove, the cabin walls groaned. Luggage shifted in the holds, strangers united in prayer. My seatmate, however, was unafraid. Against instructions, we unfastened our seatbelts, knotted our hands together, and waited. 200 bodies thundered into the sky. The air snatched our voices. People fell like rain. But those of us who remembered threw open our arms and flew. So rewind and play that again if you need to hear it. You can hear the two segments talking to each other. In the first, the woman is flying/dreaming, totally okay. Doesn't matter to most readers whether it's real, magical realism, an actual dream. But there are some references to the lights below looking like the lights of a runway, or the way the air is moving across her as though she's a plane. So that sort of calls forward to the piece that's coming. And then in the second part, we kind of hear it talking back to the first. So the descriptions she uses are bird-like and flight-like. This is magical realism in the sense that in magical realism, everything about the human world on planet Earth and our human experience remains true in the story, except you change one thing. That's my best way of defining, quick way of defining magical realism. So the one thing here is that the speaker can fly. And in part 2, we sort of see how that speaker's unique ability works in the real world. And how it changes how she sees and engages with the world, and why that one unique ability, that one rule that's changed to make it a magical realist piece, why that one rule matters. So it's not just like, oh, this character can make it rain when she wants to make it rain. That wouldn't work for this story. This character can remember her roots and fly when she needs to fly. And indeed, she flies at the end of segment 2 to save her life. And you see how it infuses her worldview when she's at the end of Concourse B, looking at her fellow passengers and likening them to birds, or the man who sits next to her. Okay. Des would appreciate this. As a mother and as a grandmother, Des would say, keep recording. This is River. He's just watched the snowplow come and snow our driveway. I'm making a video to teach to my friends and fellow writers. So as I was saying, as the story concludes, okay, as the story concludes, the speaker sees her characters as birds, right? Those who actually are. Thank you. And that's actually really revealing, because it sort of helps the reader's world and the quote normal world sync up with, meet, or join the magical realist, perhaps wiser, more infused or richer world of this character. So There's my totally discursive, interrupted, yet hopefully useful snapshot for you today from Des Cooper's Know the Mother and her beautiful story, Soft Landing. And boy, I hope that gets you excited about the kind of permission you have in short form prose, flash fiction or nonfiction. Write a dream in your flash nonfiction. Imagine a different way in your flash nonfiction. The reader will know that you can't actually fly, but you can still use your words in a way that makes it clear to the reader what's really going on and yet shows them what you believe in, what you're capable of. Okay, I hope that was fun. I hope you could tolerate the interruptions, and I will see you for the next post.